Live with Littledata session. We're back after a couple of weeks. I was on holiday last week, and joined by my colleague David. Welcome, David.
Hi there, everyone.
So today we're going to talk a little bit more about specifically kind of tracking Shopify stores and the challenges, the mistakes that people have when tracking their Shopify store. Now, David, I think you've been at this nearly as long as I have. We've seen a lot of different Shopify store setups over the years, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think there's Littledata is known for tracking Google Analytics, but obviously over that period, Shopify's own analytics product has developed quite a lot. It started as a very basic tool. In fact, it kind of wasn't available on all the plans originally, and then they built out a lot more reports. I know they've added more attribution reports this morning. But the first mistake we want to talk about is people are actually just relying on Shopify Analytics to understand how their store's performing. So tell me a bit. What do you think the problem there is?
So I think Shopify never made it their priority to combine sales data with marketing data in their own dashboards. Yes, Shopify has the ultimate truth in terms of the sales and revenue and product and user data. It's undeniably true that everything that's in there it's correct. However, the problem is when you try to link that with what's happening on the storefront, where customers are coming from, how sessions are being tracked, and how Shopify tracked a session and links events as part of a session with the marketing source.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the problem lies quite heavily. So I'm curious to hear from you. How do you think Shopify could do a better job at tracking sessions or improve attribution for their conversions?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's a couple of issues going on. So the first thing is that almost all the customers talk to just see very different numbers for, as I said, if they're using it later, they should see the purchase and revenue matching, but the actual page views and sessions and user numbers pretty different in Shopify to Google Analytics. Now, some of those differences are just about, quite technical stuff about, maybe at what stage in the page load the tracking script fires, how they do sessions. I mean, I know Google Analytics has a sort of 30-minute window sessionalization, so that any of your visit or page views within a 30-minute window will be one session. I don't actually know how Shopify does all this stuff. They're not quite as open about it. So that's basically the first problem, is that Shopify's analytics was really built as a very much part of the Shopify admin dashboard. It's effectively a black box that you can't change. Shopify just gives you the stats. Mm-hmm. And so honestly, I don't know. I know very well how Google does measurement of page views, sessions, and users, but I don't know how Shopify does it. So I think if there's a difference, there is some quite technical difference to tracking. What I do know is that when it comes to sort of tracking the actual linking those, let's say, their UTM parameters, because Shopify does use the same, it hooks into the same UTM parameters that you're using to track campaigns in Google Analytics. It just doesn't seem to do as good a job as storing those. So for a given, or linking those to a session or purchase. So for a given campaign, you're just likely to see less of that attributed in Shopify.
Yeah, and we should also point out another slight disadvantage in the sense that Shopify's tracker works only client side, only relying on it only relies on what's collected from the browser and added in the Shopify reporting, which is ironic because they have access to a lot more data than is available to be collected only from the browser.
Yeah, I just at this point perhaps reference an article I actually wrote a few months ago about Shopify stores taking advantage of first-party data. We'll put this in the links to live chat now. But if we just scroll down to the bit about Shopify Analytics, so the fact of the matter is that there's some reporting there, but the other limitation is just you're not very flexible on what reports you can build. As I said, there are the marketing attribution reports a bit advanced and so on, but there's nothing about changing the attribution model. You can't compare, for example, sort of first click to last click attribution. But perhaps for me, the biggest thing is that there's no way to get the Shopify analytics data out. It's a dashboard that you can't link to anything else. There's no export API. You can't pull that into Google Sheets or Data Studio or Power BI. Those are all things that you can do out of the box in Google Analytics. So I believe that Shopify is launching at some point an API for their analytics, but I think it will only be what I would call it will only be a kind of reporting API. You'll be able to sort of maybe pull things like number of sessions and number of page views. That's the blog post if you want to go and have a look at it. But I don't, you won't be able to own that event data like you can in Google Analytics. So I think that's my biggest problem with it. It's definitely captured differently. I'd argue less accurately, even ironically, even though Shopify's tracking their own site. But for sure, unequivocally, it's less flexible when it comes to both reporting and the ability to feed it into other data tools.
Data for action. That's very important.
Okay, so number two is only looking at the traffic acquisition in Google Analytics. So, sorry, just tried to paste in this is the one comment, but so I think it's important that we have two different types of traffic. Two different types of attribution reports in Google Analytics 4. Right, there's traffic acquisition, user acquisition. So tell us a bit about the differences.
So one looks at the session, the source of the session, and links the. So traffic acquisition shows the conversion tied to a session, and oftentimes it might happen that a user has a longer session in your storefront, like more than 30 minutes, and in those type of situations, the session times out and you end up with a new session as part of the same visit. Now, whilst it is great to look at what are the channels bringing you the most conversions and session performance and so on, it's sometimes a lot better to look at user acquisition, and particularly because the user acquisition report in GA4 is going to tell you the source of the user who converted. Now, that same user could have had two sessions if the session would have gotten interrupted, but you get a better view and a better sense on how you are acquiring customers. And this is especially also important when you also have the type of business which offers products by subscription, or you offer sort of refund product exchanges and do stuff post purchase, because you want to isolate what you consider as being a new customer versus a conversion from repeat business and so on. Yeah. So I think this is the main, to sum up, this is the main difference which is important to be understood. Yeah. Traffic acquisition looks at sessions. Yeah. And user acquisition looks at the actual person who's on your website at that given point.
Well, the full journey. That's what I think about is that with user acquisition, I mean, you may not be able to go very far back in time because, let's be honest, in the modern world, the ability to sort of link a cookie together over more than a few weeks is quite limited. But at least you can try and find out what was the first touch that customer had with your website, rather than traffic acquisition is much more likely to be skewed by, for example, like an abandoned cart email or a payment gateway or something like that. User attribution is at least going back and saying, hey, what was the first thing that brought this user, or the first most recent thing that brought the user here. There's very few. I mean, the only I have had brands say, well, yeah, but we just we have people buying every month. We just want to know what brought them in to buy this month. And so, but as I said, I think in reality that is still user attribution. I don't think there's many situations where, not many situations, but I think a lot of cookies expire. And anyway, you can go in GA4 and exchange. You can actually change the length of when you want that user cookie to expire anyway. Yeah. So I think user attribution more useful. Basically the same report though, apart from it being first user source versus session source. It's the same breakdown. I think there's probably something that the only other thing to add to that is about. I guess with the warning or the pitfall we're saying is only looking at the traffic acquisition report. I mean, what I might add is that only looking at attribution reports full stop. I mean, there's a lot more to Google Analytics than just attribution reporting. There's a lot to see there in terms of conversion rate optimization. Where are people dropping off in the funnel? Which pages are people viewing? Which product categories? Which product lists take people through to purchase? This is all, again, there's lots of out-of-the-box reports. And then perhaps I'd also flag up, as I've mentioned the last few months, is that Google's rolled out quite a lot more e-commerce reporting the last few months. So there's things like checkout funnel reports and page list reports that page a list to purchase reports that weren't there previously. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the third point then, which is neglecting to track landing page views. Why would that be important?
Big one. So the landing page is the first touch point a customer or a user has with your website, and that first touch point has the UTM parameters, which tell you where the customer came from. And without those UTM parameters, you end up with a session that starts from nowhere and ends up with maybe a conversion. So ensuring that you're tracking the landing page is super important, because again, it captures the UTM parameters and it gives you a better chance of getting a complete attribution for that conversion. There might still be things that could happen during the shopping journey, especially on the thank you page where UTM parameters can be lost, which might lose the attribution. But at least you end up with the right traffic and user acquisition report in GA4.
And it's the flip side of, as you say, obviously Littledata is about getting accurate purchases, but the flip side of that to get attributions, you need to know what was the thing, the source or the campaign that brought them to that first session again to see that purchase. So you need both things to be accurate to see the picture.
I think it's also quite interesting to put in this context to speak a bit more about our recent updates about campaign tracking and passing the campaign parameter with all of the recurring purchases and post-purchase activity. Because if you have the correct UTM parameters for your first-time users who ultimately have a first-time subscription purchase or a first-time purchase, then whenever they have a subsequent automated event going, like a recurring purchase, you're going to be able to measure the LTV and retention for that customer from that channel a lot easier. Perhaps
so just for our listeners, I should clarify what we're talking about. So Littledata rolled out an improvement last month to the way that we actually do attribution of recurring orders, which means that now, if you had, for example, let's say they came through a particular Facebook campaign through the checkout to start that subscription, all the recurring orders will also get attributed back to that campaign. And that's super useful to understanding which campaigns bring you high lifetime value users. And so why wouldn't the UTM parameters get tracked? I mean, one of them you just mentioned, the fact that it's a recurring order, not the first time. I guess the second thing is that there are definitely situations where the landing page does not get tracked. We actually again made an improvement to the latest tracking so that we have a kind of save and resend feature, if you want to put it that way, where if for whatever reason the landing page ping got missed, it gets sent with a second page view. So that's kind of, again, sort of filling in holes. The other thing we'll come on to actually in the final point we want to talk about today, but it's about the fact that the user has a GDPR banner, a cookie banner, and they may not click accept on the first page view. And the problem with that is that there's no UTMs on the second page. So let's say they come into product, they are actually interested in it, they click through the product details or to another product, but they haven't accepted the cookies yet. Typically, in most tracking setups, those UTM parameters are lost. So again, Littledata has a kind of a save for that, but equally, we have a way of integrating with the cookie banner to make that work. We'll come on to that last point. Before we do, let's talk about number 4, which was unaware that thank you page is not being tracked. There's a few double negatives there. Perhaps to make that more simple, your thank you pages are not being tracked.
Yeah. Why? So this is quite a complex one, because either a user might just so trying to sum up some of the most common things, but Shopify increasingly made it more complex and harder to add tracking strips on the checkout pages for security reasons. And because of this, it's quite hard to get the ultimate thank you page event after a purchase event has happened. Now, why this thank you page event is thank you page event is important is because many of the conversion tracking tools, like maybe Google Ads, rely on that thank you page to confirm the conversion.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, almost all conversion tracking traditionally would be basically a ping from the thank you page to say, right, because you've seen that page, you must have purchased. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily true, because first of all, they may have seen the page but previously purchased. They may reload the page, that causes duplicates, or they may have not purchased but never seen the page, and that happens because mobile browser, it's too slow for them to wait. Maybe they don't need to see it at all. Payment goes through. They know that. They close the browser before waiting. And maybe there's, as you say, there's some kind of technical limitation or bug that prevents that sort of tracking firing, that tag firing at all. So what we've seen over the years is that's become more flaky. Like, I think when we started Littledata 5 years back, maybe that happened in 5 to 10% of the time. It now happens in more like 20-25% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's suddenly a big problem. Like you're missing 20% of all of your conversion tags.
Yeah, and especially if you have an ad blocker or a tracking blocker or something like that, it's quite hard to get the library loading again on the thank you page to get the event tracked.
Yeah.
And on the other side, we also have found some other interesting situations where the thank you page was tracked multiple times, where users went back to the thank you page from the email confirmation link.
Because that's what it actually is. When you say the thank you page, it's basically technically it's an order confirmation page. It just says that you ordered this. It's going to be, you charge this amount, you're going to be shipped. So it's natural that people might want to go click through back to that page and see. And again, theoretically, there's a sort of there's a if statement you can put on there and the tagging to say if it's the first time. But again, not super reliable.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, I guess the question is what could you do differently, and the plug here is for server-side tracking. What Littledata does differently, and and a few other tools, is that we make sure that the ping, we don't rely on that ping. We do do it if it's possible, but if that ping doesn't happen for all these reasons, we make sure it's tracked directly from Shopify servers.
Yeah.
Okay, final one. Not considering some users have opted out of tracking. So I guess this is, there's coming regulation in the US that makes it more common in the US, but I think what's different in America compared to Europe is that in America, typically you have a right to opt out of being tracked. In Europe, you have to actually opt into being tracked. And so, anyone who browses the web in Europe is very used to having a cookie consent banner, which may be a tiny little thing in the box. Some apps go to some websites go to sort of full way and have this sort of huge dialogue saying, allow all cookies or choose some cookies. But the bare minimum, and I think frankly most of our customers in e-commerce try and have a fairly unobtrusive banner saying, hey, do you want to accept opt-in?
So we touched base on this earlier on, but I think this is one of the elements which can erode the data quality the most, because if you delay the transcript, the Google library from loading, the GTAP scripts from loading when the session starts, you basically have a very high chance of losing those UTM parameters which were available at the session start, and just end up with a broken attribution from the start point of that session. So it's quite important that you if you're selling on Shopify, and if you have a cookie banner, you should be very careful with how that's implemented, so that you're not delaying which have to be loaded at the session start to get the correct data from point one.
Yeah, and to expand on that, the classic problem is that user clicks OK, because most people do it except click allow because they're quite used to that. So it's not, that's not the problem itself. The problem is that actually the page view wasn't fired to start with, and it's not fired at that point. So as we talked about earlier, user navigates to the second page, no UTM parameters. Then when you go and look at that in Google Analytics, or in fact in Shopify or any other tool, there's no campaign data there because it was lost. So I think making sure the page view does fire when they click allow is important. But equally, if you want to avoid getting massive fines from data regulators in Europe, you have to make sure that it doesn't fire before, or there's no cookie set specifically before the user clicks OK.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think that was the sort of 5 problems that we wanted to cover. A quick plug that there's a whole blog post that I've written that explains a bit more about this, all these topics. In fact, there's another 5 things to watch out for if you want to get super accurate data from your Shopify store. Just to recap, the 5 we covered today have been the fact that you need to stop relying on Shopify analytics, or the fact that you're solely relying on it if that's your chosen thing is, I think, a problem in terms of the scaling of your business and the flexibility of reporting you can get. Only looking at traffic acquisition report in GA4, that means that you're probably not making the most out of Google Analytics, either from an attribution reporting point of view, or in fact from any of the other reports. The fact that you're neglecting to track the landing page views means that, I mean, neglecting maybe a bit strong. You may not realize that you need to do it, but you do. And then the fact that we need to also track the thank you page views, or the fact that they're not being tracked, is a problem. And then finally, you've got to do all that within by respecting the user's right to opt in or opt out of the tracking. So yeah, it's a busy old world if you're trying to do accurate web analytics in the modern world.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, David. Thanks for being on the live stream. We'll be continuing next week with another guest, and hope you'll have a great weekend, and see you again next week. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.